After all preparations in last episode, I'm now ready to start gluing the centerboard case to the dividing bulkhead. I use epoxy thickened with cotton fibers that I strike on the side of the bulkhead before I clamp it in place and overfill the joining. Here you can see the result of an earlier mistake. I need to fill the gap that was created from bad alignment. Thus I smear thickened epoxy on the side and fit a pre-prepared piece of plywood in the gap and secure the piece with some masking tape that will keep it in place while curing. Now I start pre-wetting the edges along the case. Note that I have roughened the edges beforehand. This is to improve the physical bond with the epoxy. The gaps gets extra attention with more epoxy from both sides. When I have a nice wet fillet along the edges, I start laying glass that I wet out. I put glass that cover the joining and a few centimeters on both sides. This will make the joining at least as strong as the rest of the hull. The vertical gap here requires extra care. To make sure that the thickened epoxy stays in the gap, I cover this side with glass. But to wet out the cloth, I need to use less thick epoxy. Here is another mistake that I made. When I pressed the bulkhead in place, it got bent backwards. The gap is too wide to press in place. A small piece of strip will close the gap. I just need to make it fit. With some coarse trimming, regular trimming and some fine trimming. Now it fits good enough. On the inside I also need to adjust by trimming off this. I cut it with a saw and round down the edge with some sanding. Down here there is also a small unalignment. I need a pressure device to press this spot inwards. Also this corner is rounded off. With all prep work done, I can continue the gluing. I pre-wet the surface to close the pores. Then I put on some really thick epoxy again. It is needed to make the epoxy stay in place on a vertical surface. Putting on glass will also help keep the epoxy in place and make the bond really strong after it has been wetted out. With the pressure device acting on this spot, I can glass in also this small segment of the joining. The gap-filling stick is prepared with thickened epoxy. I fill the gap with plenty of epoxy and smear some on the stick as well, before I push it in place. To strengthen the joining and keep the epoxy in place, I glass in this stretch as well. When the joinings done so far has cured, I continue with some more prep work. I want a smooth transition from the case to the hull, so I use a rasp to flatten the edge and a coarse sandpaper to level it further. Some tracks should be left to improve the physical bonding. Now I put glass on the outside on this joining as well. Fill any gap with epoxy and put glass in place. Now I'm done with the centerboard case. Next week I hope that I have got some sailing material to show. The authorities are handling material from that period now. Until then, take care and please give me some support.